I'm Margaret Wilson, 68 years old, and I never thought my family recipe would spark such violence. There I was, adding my mother's secret blend of herbs to the simmering pot when my daughter-in-law Stephanie lunged forward. The ladle struck my shoulder with surprising force. "Who cooks like that?" she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "No wonder Robert hated your dinners growing up." The kitchen fell silent. My son stared at his shoes. My grandchildren froze wide-eyed. As hot soup dripped down my blouse, I realized this wasn't about seasoning at all. Something far more toxic was brewing in our family. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family drama around your dinner table. Trust me, what happened next in my kitchen will make your family gatherings seem peaceful by comparison. The relationship between Robert, my only son, and me had always been loving, or so I believed. When he married Stephanie 12 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms, hoping she'd be the daughter I never had. James, my husband of 45 years, had passed away 3 years ago, leaving a gaping hole in my life. Our traditional Sunday family dinners had been my anchor through grief, a tradition that spanned decades, where I'd serve my family recipes passed down through 4 generations of Wilson women. I should have noticed the warning signs earlier. Stephanie's takeover of family affairs began subtly after she married Robert. At first, it was small suggestions, moving our gathering time to accommodate her schedule, changing the seating arrangements, so she sat at the head of the table, my husband's place for 40 years. I didn't protest. After losing James, I was grateful to have family around me, even if things were changing. Then came the comments about my outdated cooking. "Don't you think we should try something healthier, Margaret?" she'd ask, eyebrow raised as I prepared my grandmother's famous pot roast. "These old recipes are so full of fat." No wonder Robert had weight issues growing up. My son would chuckle uncomfortably but never contradict her, even though he'd always loved that pot roast and had been a skinny child. The Sunday before the ladle incident, I overheard Stephanie in my kitchen on the phone. "You know how it is, pretending to enjoy these ancient recipes. Robert's finally seeing how ridiculous these traditions are." My heart sank, but I pretended not to hear when I entered the kitchen. Stephanie quickly ended her call, flashing that practiced smile. My recipe collection was my most treasured possession. Each yellowed card contained not just ingredients, but memories. My mother standing at the stove teaching me to make chicken soup when I had measles. My grandmother showing me how to roll perfect dumplings. The first time I taught Robert to make our family's special apple pie. These weren't just recipes. They were my heritage, my history, my heart. Stephanie made no secret of her contempt for old-fashioned cooking. She followed trendy food bloggers and constantly talked about molecular gastronomy and fusion cuisine. "Nobody cooks like this anymore, Margaret," she'd say, waving dismissively at my traditional beef stew. I'd smile and serve it anyway, noticing how Robert took smaller and smaller portions over the years, though my grandchildren still cleaned their plates. The ladle incident forced me to confront what I'd been ignoring. The way Robert stared at the floor while his wife berated me, the way he mumbled, "Mom, maybe we should try some new recipes." Afterward, it broke my heart. He had chosen sides, and he hadn't chosen his mother. As I dabbed soup from my blouse that afternoon, I looked into my son's eyes, searching for the boy who once proudly proclaimed my chicken soup could cure anything. Instead, I saw a man who couldn't meet my gaze, a man who'd let his mother be humiliated rather than risk his wife's displeasure. That's when I understood this wasn't about soup at all. It was about power, control, and the slow, deliberate erasure of my place in my own family. I left my own home in tears that Sunday, something I'd never done before. For 30 years, I'd hosted those dinners through good times and bad, even the Sunday after Jameis' funeral. But now, with soup stains on my favorite blouse and the echo of Stephanie's harsh words ringing in my ears, I couldn't bear to stay. "I think I need to lie down," I'd mumbled, grabbing my purse. No one tried to stop me, not even Robert. As I backed my car out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of my family through the dining room window, already seated and eating as if nothing had happened. The 20-minute drive home was a blur of tears. My phone didn't ring that evening, or the next day. By Tuesday, I convinced myself that Robert would call, apologizing for his wife's behavior and his own silence. The call never came. Instead, while checking Facebook to see my grandchildren's school photos, I was greeted by a post from Stephanie. Family Dinner Rescue Mission. Teaching Mother Wilson that soup doesn't have to taste like it's from the Middle Ages. Cooking intervention saving the family palate. It had 47 likes and a dozen comments, including one from my niece Sarah. Aunt Margaret's cooking is pretty old-fashioned. Good luck, Steph. My hands shook as I scrolled through more comments, each one a small betrayal from extended family and friends who'd happily eaten at my table for years. Even Robert had liked the post. I felt physically ill. A sensation of being erased from my own narrative. I tried calling Robert the next day. The call went to voicemail. I left a measured message. "Hi, honey. It's Mom. I'd like to talk about what happened Sunday. Please call me back." He texted a response hours later. "Really busy at work. Stephanie says she's sorry if you misunderstood. We're good, right? Talk soon." If I misunderstood? The memory of the ladle striking my shoulder wasn't something I could misunderstand. But before I could process this dismissal, another blow came. An email arrived in my inbox with the subject line, "Wilson Family Reunion. Exciting changes." For 3 decades, I had organized our extended family reunion each July, a gathering that had grown from 20 people to nearly 70 as our family expanded. It was a labor of love I took pride in, from planning the menu to arranging activities for 4 generations. The email, sent by Stephanie from her personal account to the entire family distribution list, announced that she was taking the reins of the family reunion to bring it into the 21st century. She outlined plans for a catered affair at an upscale venue instead of our traditional park gathering, with professionally prepared food instead of potluck, and an online payment system for family members to contribute to the significantly higher cost. At the very bottom, almost as an afterthought. And of course, a special thanks to Margaret for her many years of organizing. "We thought you might enjoy just being a guest this time. No work, all fun." I hadn't been consulted. I hadn't been asked. I had been informed, along with everyone else, that my role had been taken from me. And based on the reply all responses flooding in, most family members thought it was a wonderful idea. I shut down my computer and sat in silence as the sun set outside my window. This wasn't just about a ladle anymore. This wasn't even just about family recipes. This was a calculated campaign to push me to the sidelines of my own family. And it was working. But somewhere in the ache of betrayal, a small spark ignited. I thought of my mother, who had raised 3 children alone after my father died young. I thought of my grandmother, who had kept her family fed during the Depression by stretching ingredients in creative ways. Strong women who had faced worse challenges than a manipulative daughter-in-law. "Enough," I whispered to the empty room. I wouldn't be pushed aside so easily. Not from the family I had nurtured for decades. Not from the traditions I had lovingly maintained. I might be 68 years old, but I wasn't ready to be shelved like an outdated cookbook. "She did what?" My sister Judith's voice crackled through the phone, indignation clear despite the distance. Judith, 2 years my junior and living in Arizona, had always been my closest confidant. "Hit me with a ladle." "Actually hit me, Judy." And Robert just stood there. I repeated, the words still feeling surreal. "That's assault. And now she's taking over the reunion?" "Margaret, this isn't just rude behavior anymore. This is systematic." I sighed, twisting the phone cord between my fingers. "I know. I'm starting to see that now. But why? What have I ever done except welcome her into the family?" Judith's tone grew serious. "It's not about you, Meg. It's about her. Listen, I didn't want to tell you this because it seemed like gossip, but Stephanie's been calling family members for months, telling them you're becoming forgetful, that you're struggling since James died. She's been suggesting that you shouldn't be living alone, that you're not competent anymore." The room seemed to tilt. "What? Who has she been talking to?" "Everyone, Meg. Cousins, aunts, even old family friends. She called me last month asking if I'd noticed your decline during our video chats," said Robert was very concerned. My free hand gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. "But I'm fine. I do the newspaper crossword daily. I volunteer at the library twice a week. I drive. I manage my own finances. I know. I know," Judith soothed. I told her I thought you were sharp as ever. "But Meg, she's planting seeds. And from what you're telling me about the reunion and Sunday dinners, she's systematically taking over your roles in the family. The next revelation came from Diana, my best friend of 30 years. Over coffee at her kitchen table, I poured out the whole story. Diana, never one to mince words, set down her mug with a thud. Stephanie's been doing this to other people too, Margaret. Remember Carol from our book club? Stephanie joined that charity committee Carol chaired and within 3 months had pushed her out completely. Said Carol's ideas were outdated too. And now she runs the committee. I frowned, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. She did the same thing at the church auxiliary. And the school parent committee when the kids were younger. Diana nodded grimly. It's a pattern. She targets established women in positions of respect, undermines them, then takes their place. You're just her latest victim. A soft knock at my back door later that week revealed my 16-year-old grandson Ethan, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Grandma, Mom thinks I'm at math tutoring," he said, stepping into my kitchen. "But I needed to talk to you." The story he told chilled me further. According to Ethan, Stephanie monitored all communication between Robert and me, often deleting my text messages before he saw them. She had implemented what she called boundaries about what the children could tell me about their home life. Most disturbingly, she had begun suggesting to the children that Grandma is getting confused about things, instructing them to report back if I said or did anything concerning. "Dad doesn't see it," Ethan said, accepting the cookies I offered. "Or maybe he doesn't want to see it, but Tyler and Emma and I know what's happening. It's not right, Grandma." I hugged my grandson, warmed by his loyalty, but disturbed by what was happening in my son's household. The final revelation came by accident. While searching for a bread pudding recipe online, I stumbled across a food blog called Modern Heritage Kitchen. The site featured beautifully photographed dishes that looked strangely familiar. Clicking through the recipes, my blood ran cold. My grandmother's special chicken soup, a recipe passed down through generations. Read one post, featuring my mother's exact recipe, down to the specific blend of herbs. Another showcased family heritage apple dumplings with caramel sauce. My grandmother's signature dessert, one I had never published anywhere. The blog was Stephanie's. She had never shown interest in my recipe collection, but I remembered her asking to borrow my recipe box for inspiration last Christmas. She had photographed my handwritten recipe cards, my family's culinary heritage, and was now presenting them as her own family traditions. Worse still, as I explored further, I discovered she had compiled an e-cookbook, Stephanie's Family Heritage Collection, selling for $14.99. The description promised secret family recipes passed down through generations, now modernized for today's cooks. My hands shook as I purchased a copy and downloaded it. There they were. My mother's secret cornbread, my grandmother's holiday stuffing, even my great-grandmother's pickled vegetables, some with slight modifications, but unmistakably the recipes I had cherished all my life. The final page featured a photo of my mother's handwritten recipe card for her famous soup. The very soup I had been making when Stephanie struck me with the ladle. Finding this treasure in an old family box inspired my culinary journey. The caption read, "It wasn't just theft of recipes. It was theft of my family history, my legacy." And suddenly, the ladle incident made perfect, horrible sense. Stephanie hadn't lashed out because I was seasoning soup wrong. She had lashed out because I was making the very soup she had claimed as her own heritage. My presence in the kitchen, making the authentic version, threatened her fabricated narrative. As I sat at my computer, staring at my mother's handwriting digitized and commodified without permission, something hardened in me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about honoring the women who came before me, whose knowledge and traditions were being stolen and twisted. For the first time since the ladle struck my shoulder, I felt not just hurt but righteously angry, and with that anger came clarity. I would not fade quietly into the background. I would not be erased. The Lakeside Garden Resort was nothing like the community park where our family reunions had been held for 30 years. Valet parking attendants greeted arriving cars. A sign with elegant typography announced Wilson Family Reunion outside a private event space, overlooking manicured lawns and a sparkling lake. I had debated not attending. Diana had offered to take me away for the weekend instead. "Let them miss you," Shed suggested. but something told me absence would only play into Stephanie's narrative. If I didn't show up, it would confirm her whispers about my decline. So here I was, wearing my best blue dress and pearl earrings that had been a gift from James on our 40th anniversary, walking alone into a gathering that until this year had been my labor of love. The interior was sleek and modern, white linen tablecloths, minimalist centerpieces, and a string quartet playing in the corner. Gone were the colorful balloons, the mismatched tables pushed together in the park pavilion, the children running freely between the playground and the adults. Everything felt constrained, perfect, and sterile. My entrance drew looks but few greetings. I spotted Aunt Martha, who had always brought her famous deviled eggs to our gatherings, sitting awkwardly at a table with strangers. The resort's waitstaff were serving uniform appetizers on small plates. "Margaret, you made it." Stephanie's voice rang out as she approached, radiant in an expensive-looking dress, air kissing my cheek. "Doesn't everything look amazing? So much more elegant than the park, right? Robert was worried you might not approve of the changes, but I told him you'd be thrilled to just relax and enjoy." "It's certainly different," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Where is Robert?" "Oh, he's helping with some last-minute details. You know men, hopeless with event planning. Let me show you to your seat." My seat was at a table in the far corner, with distant relatives I barely knew. Not at the family table where I had always sat with my son, sister, and grandchildren. The message couldn't have been clearer. I was an afterthought, not the matriarch. Throughout the afternoon, I watched Stephanie hold court, moving from table to table, accepting compliments on the upgraded reunion. Robert followed in her wake, oddly subdued. My grandchildren caught my eye occasionally, Ethan giving me a small, secret wave. Emma, looking confused about why I was sitting so far away. Then came the moment I had been dreading. Stephanie clinked her glass, calling for attention. "Everyone, it's time for our special family tradition," though with a little modern twist. She gestured toward servers who were bringing out soup tureens. As many of you know, soup has always been a Wilson family tradition. Today, I'm honored to present my grandmother's special recipe, passed down through generations, and now to me. I felt my chest tighten as she continued. "This heritage recipe has been in my family for over 100 years. I've updated it slightly for modern palates. A little less salt, a touch of lemon zest to brighten the flavors. It's featured in my cookbook, which many of you have kindly purchased." From across the room, I could see it was my mother's soup. The soup I had been making when Stephanie struck me. The soup whose recipe card she had photographed and claimed as her own heritage. I took a deep breath, watching family members taste the soup, nod approvingly. Some looked confused. The soup was familiar but different, not quite matching their memories of reunions past. "Isn't it wonderful?" gushed my cousin Elaine to her neighbor, though I could have sworn Aunt Gertrude's recipe had more dill. After the meal, Stephanie again took center stage for a speech. She thanked the resort staff, the event planner she'd hired, her helpers who had addressed invitations. She thanked Robert for supporting her vision and her children for being patient while Mommy planned everything. She thanked everyone except me, the person who had maintained this tradition for 30 years, who had kept our growing family connected across decades and distances. I was being erased in real time. When Stephanie finished speaking, polite applause filled the room. Then, to my surprise, my grandson Ethan stood up. "I think we should also thank Grandma Margaret," he said clearly. "She's the one who started these reunions and kept them going all these years. All the traditions we're updating today are because of her." A moment of awkward silence followed. Then my niece Sarah began to clap. My sister Judith joined in. Slowly, the applause spread, faces turning toward me with dawning remembrance and, in some cases, shame. I hadn't planned to speak. But now I rose, smoothed my dress, and walked to the center of the room, not with anger or accusation, but with the quiet dignity my mother had taught me. "Thank you, Ethan," I began, my voice steady. "Family has always been the center of my life. These reunions began in my backyard with just 20 of us, when many of you were children. Over the years, we've celebrated births, marriages, graduations. We've comforted each other through losses. We've kept our family story alive through our gatherings, our shared meals, our traditions." I looked around the room, making eye contact with relatives, old and young. "The recipes we've shared, like today's soup, connect us to those who came before. My mother taught me to make that soup when I was 10 years old. Her mother taught her. These aren't just meals. They're our heritage. Our history passed from hand to hand, heart to heart. I could see confusion spreading across faces. People glancing from me to Stephanie, who had gone rigid. I'm glad to see our family continuing to gather, in whatever form that takes, because in the end, what matters isn't where we meet, or even what we eat. It's that we remember who we are and where we came from, that we honor those connections truthfully. I emphasized the last word slightly, then returned to my seat amid thoughtful silence. I hadn't directly challenged Stephanie's lies. I didn't need to. The seeds of doubt had been planted. People were remembering who had really preserved our family traditions all these years. Later, as the event wound down, several relatives approached me with questions. I remember your recipe cards. Didn't they come from your mother? Small cracks appearing in Stephanie's carefully constructed narrative. As I drove home alone, I felt something shift. I had stood my ground with grace. I had spoken truth without accusation. And most importantly, I had refused to be erased from my own family story. The Monday after the reunion, I decided to reach out to Robert. Despite everything, he was still my son, my only child. I couldn't believe he fully understood what was happening, the extent of Stephanie's manipulations. "Robert, it's Mom," I said when he finally answered his phone. "I think we need to talk, just the two of us." A pause. "About what, Mom?" "About everything that's been happening. The incident in my kitchen. The recipes Stephanie is claiming as her own family heritage. The reunion." His voice turned cold in a way I'd never heard before. Stephanie explained all that. "You've been confused lately, mixing up details. She's trying to preserve family traditions, because you're struggling with them." "Robert, that's simply not true. I'm not confused about anything." My voice rose slightly. "Those are my family's recipes she's claiming as her own." She hit me with a ladle. "That's not something I imagined." "Mom." "Stop." His tone was dismissive. "Stephanie barely tapped you when you were about to ruin the soup with too much salt. She told me you've been forgetting ingredients lately. And those recipes? They're similar to ours because all old family recipes are kind of the same. You're making connections that aren't there." I felt as if I'd been slapped. My own son was gaslighting me, repeating Stephanie's lies as if they were facts. "I want to come over and talk to you in person," I insisted. "Now isn't a good time, Mom. Stephanie's taking the kids to see her parents next weekend. Maybe after that." But the conversation haunted me. The way Robert had dismissed my concerns, the coldness in his voice. It wasn't like him, at least, not like the son I had raised. 2 days later, my neighbor Harriet stopped by with troubling news. "Margaret, I saw Robert at your house yesterday. He and Stephanie were there for quite a while. I thought you might be ill, so I was going to check on you, but then I realized your car wasn't there." I frowned. "I wasn't home yesterday. Why would they be at my house when I wasn't there?" A sick feeling grew as I called my sister. "Judy, something's not right. Robert and Stephanie were at my house when I wasn't home. They have a key for emergencies, but—" "Check your important papers," Judith said immediately. Now, with shaking hands, I went to my home office and opened the filing cabinet where I kept all my important documents. Everything looked in order at first glance. But when I examined my financial folder more carefully, I noticed slight disarrangements. Papers not filed exactly as ID left them. A call to my bank confirmed my worst fears. Robert had accessed my accounts 2 days earlier, not just viewed them. He had changed the mailing address for statements to his home and added Stephanie, as an authorized person, on my checking account. Further calls revealed more shocks. My investment account had been accessed. The deed to my house, the house James and I had bought 40 years ago, where we had raised Robert, had a new document on file. A quitclaim deed, transferring ownership to Robert and Stephanie Wilson, with life estate interest for Margaret Wilson. I sat at my kitchen table, stunned into silence. Without my knowledge or consent, my son had begun transferring my assets into his and Stephanie's names. When I finally gathered the courage to call Robert and confront him, his explanation chilled me to the bone. It's for your own protection, Mom, he said, as if explaining to a child. Stephanie and I have been worried about your memory issues. We've noticed you getting confused about finances, forgetting to pay bills. That's absolutely untrue, I said, my voice shaking with anger now. I've never missed a bill payment in my life. See, this is what we're concerned about. You don't remember the overdue notices Stephanie found when she was helping organize your mail. The doctor said this might happen. You forgetting things and then getting defensive when it's pointed out. What doctor? I haven't seen any doctor about memory problems. Robert sighed loudly. We went together last month, Mom. Dr. Patterson? He said early-stage dementia can present like this, perfectly lucid 1 minute, forgetful the next, with the patient unaware of their lapses. I had never met a Dr. Patterson in my life, had never been evaluated for dementia. This was a complete fabrication. Robert, this is not true. Any of it. I'm going to call my lawyer tomorrow, and… That's why we had to act, Mom, he interrupted. Stephanie and I are trying to protect your assets before you make impulsive decisions. We're looking at assisted living facilities where you'll have proper care. Green Meadows has a memory care unit with an excellent reputation. I'm not going to any assisted living facility. There's nothing wrong with my memory. I was shouting now, something I rarely did. This anger and denial just confirms what Dr. Patterson said. Mom. Well, talk when you're calmer. Stephanie has been researching the best approaches for family members in our situation. After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence. The betrayal was complete. My son and his wife weren't just trying to erase me from family traditions. They were trying to erase me from my own life. Take my home, my money, my independence, all under the guise of concern for my well-being. And they had clearly been planning this for some time. The whispered concerns to family members, the fabricated doctor's visits, the legal maneuvers, all designed to paint me as an incompetent old woman who needed to be managed and eventually institutionalized. That night was the darkest of my life. Darker even than the night after James died, because then I had lost my husband but still had my son. Now I felt completely alone, betrayed by the person I had brought into this world, had loved unconditionally for 43 years. For a brief, desperate moment, I considered giving in. Maybe it would be easier to just let them take control, to accept the narrative they were creating about my declining faculties, to shuffle quietly into the background role they had scripted for me. But somewhere in the darkness, I heard James' voice as clearly as if he were sitting beside me. Fight, Maggie. This isn't you. You've never backed down from a challenge in your life, and I knew what I had to do. The house felt emptier than usual that night. Even though I had lived alone since James' death, I had never felt truly alone until now. The knowledge that my own son was actively working against me, believing Stephanie's lies, or pretending to believe them, left a hollowness in my chest that nothing could fill. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in James' old armchair, a cup of tea growing cold beside me, wondering how we had come to this. Had I failed as a mother somehow? Had I missed signs in Stephanie from the beginning? Could I have prevented this systematic campaign to push me aside? By morning, I had reached a decision born of exhaustion and despair. Perhaps it would be easier to simply concede, sign over the house, move into assisted living, let Robert and Stephanie have what they wanted. At 68, did I really have the energy to fight this battle? Against my own son? I pulled out my phone to call Robert, to tell him I would cooperate with their plans, when something stopped me. A notification had popped up on my screen. Memories from 5 years ago. The photo showed James and me on our anniversary, laughing together at a restaurant. His eyes crinkled at the corners, that smile I had loved for 45 years. James would never have given up. He would never have let someone steamroll him, especially not when the truth was on his side. I put down the phone and went to the attic instead. There, in a cedar chest, were boxes of James' belongings that I hadn't been able to sort through after his death. His sweaters, still faintly smelling of his aftershave, his collection of fishing lures, and a bundle of letters tied with blue ribbon. I recognized my own handwriting on the envelopes. These were letters I had written to James during our courtship, when he was away at college and I was finishing high school. He had kept them all these years. Sitting cross-legged on the attic floor, I untied the ribbon and began to read. The earnest declarations of a 17-year-old girl, full of hopes and plans. My younger self leaped off the pages, determined, passionate, unafraid to speak her mind. I won't let anyone tell me what I can and cannot do. I had written in one letter, Aunt Mildred says girls shouldn't study business, but I'm going to prove her wrong. I'm going to build something meaningful with my life, James. Something that lasts. When had I lost that fire, that determination to stand up for myself? Among the letters was a note James had written to me just months before his death, tucked inside a birthday card. Margaret, my love for 45 years, you have always been the strong one, the one who keeps us all together, who never backs down when it matters. That strength is why I fell in love with you all those years ago, and why I love you even more today. I wiped tears from my cheeks. James had seen strength in me even when I didn't see it in myself. And somewhere, beneath the hurt and betrayal, that strength was still there. I just needed to find it again. As if on cue, my doorbell rang. I tucked the letters back into their box and went downstairs to find Diana standing on my porch, a determined expression on her face. "I've been calling you all morning," she said, brushing past me into the house. "Why haven't you answered?" "I was in the attic," I explained, following her to the kitchen, where she began making fresh coffee, looking at Jameis things. Diana turned, studying my face. "You've been crying, and you look like you haven't slept." I slumped into a kitchen chair. "Robert and Stephanie are trying to take everything, Diana. My house, my money. They're saying I have dementia, that I need to be in assisted living. That's what I came to talk to you about." Diana placed a mug of coffee in front of me and sat down. "I've been doing some digging about Stephanie." What Diana revealed over the next hour stunned me. She had spoken with a friend whose sister lived in Stephanie's hometown. Through that connection, she had uncovered a pattern that chilled me to the bone. Stephanie had been married before Robert. Her first husband's mother, Eleanor, had owned a valuable historic home in Charleston. According to Diana's source, within 2 years of the marriage, Eleanor had been declared incompetent and moved to a memory care facility. The house had been sold, the proceeds ostensibly for Eleanor's care. But Eleanor had died within months of the move, and the money had seemingly vanished. There were whispers, but nothing could be proven. Diana explained. Stephanie divorced shortly after Eleanor's death and moved here, where she met Robert. No one made the connection. I sat back, pieces falling into place. "She's done this before." Diana nodded grimly. "And she's following the same playbook with you. Isolate, undermine, take control of assets, institutionalize." A strange calm settled over me. This wasn't about me being a bad mother or Robert suddenly turning against me. This was a calculated scheme by a practiced manipulator. And my son was as much a victim as I was, even if he couldn't see it. Over the next week, I began methodically researching and documenting everything. I printed out copies of Stephanie's food blog where she claimed my family recipes as her own. I recorded dates and details of financial transactions I hadn't authorized. I made notes of every inconsistency in the stories Robert had repeated about my supposedly failing memory. I consulted with a lawyer, not the family attorney Robert knew, but a sharp-eyed woman specializing in elder law, recommended by Diana's niece. "This is financial elder abuse," Barbara Livingston said bluntly after reviewing my documents. "And your daughter-in-law has been remarkably thorough in setting the stage. The whisper campaign about your mental decline, the gradual isolation from family, the unauthorized financial maneuvers, it's textbook." "Can we reverse what they've done?" I asked. "We can try. The quitclaim deed is problematic since you never signed it. That's outright fraud. The bank access is trickier if Robert had existing power of attorney." "He doesn't," I said firmly. "I never gave anyone power of attorney after James died." Barbara's eyebrows rose. "Then we have a stronger case." "But Margaret, you need to understand something. Fighting this will mean potentially serious legal consequences for your son." I took a deep breath. "I know, but I have to believe that Robert is being manipulated too. That when he sees the truth about Stephanie, he'll make things right." "Let's hope so," Barbara said, not sounding entirely convinced. "In the meantime, we need to protect you and your assets. I'll file for an emergency injunction to freeze any further transactions, and I suggest you change the locks on your house immediately." That night, after the locksmith left, I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, making notes for the fight ahead. Not just a legal fight, but a fight for my family, for truth, for my very identity. For the first time since the Ladle incident, I felt not just anger or hurt, but purpose, a cold, clear determination. I would not be erased. I would not be written out of my own life story. I would fight, not just for myself, but for the memory of my parents, my grandparents, all the women whose recipes and wisdom Stephanie had tried to claim as her own. I thought of my grandson Ethan, standing up at the reunion to acknowledge my role, of Diana, digging for truth to help me, of my sister Judith, who had warned me when she saw the pattern. I wasn't alone after all, and I was stronger than Stephanie had calculated. The key is not to confront them directly. Not yet, Barbara advised during our second meeting. We need to build our case methodically while protecting your interests. I nodded, understanding the strategy. This wasn't just about emotional satisfaction. It was about long-term justice and protection. My first step was securing my remaining assets. With Barbara's guidance, I opened new accounts at a different bank, transferred funds that hadn't been compromised, and placed a fraud alert on my credit. I updated my will with specific language that would make it difficult to challenge on grounds of mental incompetence, including an evaluation by a respected geriatric psychiatrist who confirmed I was perfectly cogent. Next came the careful work of rebuilding family connections that Stephanie had systematically damaged. I started with my niece, Sarah, inviting her for coffee. I was surprised to see you sitting so far away at the reunion, Sarah said cautiously. Stephanie said you preferred to be away from the noise. Did she? I replied mildly. That's interesting, since I wasn't asked where I wanted to sit. Gradually, as we talked, I could see Sarah's perception shifting. I didn't attack Stephanie directly or make dramatic claims. I simply shared inconsistencies, asked gentle questions that highlighted contradictions in Stephanie's narrative. You know, I never mentioned memory concerns to Stephanie, Sarah admitted finally. She told everyone you had confided in her about forgetting things, and she was respecting your privacy by managing the situation quietly. That's quite thoughtful of her, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Though it's odd she'd share my private concerns with the entire family if she was respecting my privacy. Sarah's eyes widened slightly as the contradiction registered. One by one, I reconnected with family members, always with the same approach, not accusing, not demanding they take sides, but quietly planting seeds of doubt about the narrative Stephanie had created. Meanwhile, Barbara's assistant researched Stephanie's past. They confirmed Diana's information about Stephanie's first mother-in-law and uncovered more. Before Eleanor, there had been a wealthy aunt who had taken Stephanie in as a teenager. That aunt had also ended up in assisted living after signing over significant assets, ostensibly for her care. It's a pattern, Barbara confirmed, and we're not the only ones who have noticed. I've been in touch with Eleanor's nephew, who suspected something wasn't right but couldn't prove it at the time. Hess willing to provide an affidavit about what happened. My grandson, Ethan, continued to visit secretly, providing crucial information about what was happening in Robert and Stephanie's home. Dad's really stressed. Ethan reported during one visit, he and Mom argue a lot when they think we can't hear. Last night he asked her about some money that's missing from their joint account, and she got really defensive. This aligned with what Barbara's financial investigator had discovered. Funds from my accounts had been transferred to Robert and Stephanie's joint account, then moved again to accounts in Stephanie's name only. She's not just manipulating the narrative, Barbara observed. She's manipulating Robert financially as well. A breakthrough came when Ethan mentioned Stephanie's growing anxiety about her cooking blog. She's always checking her comments and emails, deleting stuff. She seems really worried about something. Curious, I began monitoring the blog more closely. The comments section had become increasingly contentious, with professional chefs questioning the authenticity of Stephanie's heritage recipes. This is identical to Marcella Hazan's famous tomato sauce. One comment read, right down to the unusual butter addition. Are you sure this is your grandmother's recipe? Another noted, I recognize this technique from Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking. Strange that your family heritage exactly matches published recipes from famous chefs. Stephanie deleted these comments quickly, but they kept coming. Someone in the food blogging community had recognized her pattern of appropriation, and word was spreading. This vulnerability gave me an idea. Working with Barbara, I carefully documented every recipe on Stephanie's blog that had been taken from my family collection, providing original recipe cards, family photos of meals featuring these dishes, and statements from older relatives confirming these were Wilson family recipes. Then, through Barbara, we sent this documentation to the publisher of Stephanie's e-cookbook, along with a cease and desist letter regarding the unauthorized use of my family's intellectual property. The publisher's response was swift. Stephanie's cookbook was pulled from their platform pending investigation. The publisher also notified food websites that had promoted her work. Within days, Stephanie's carefully constructed culinary persona began unraveling. Food bloggers who had once praised her unique heritage recipes published retractions. The cooking forum, where she had built her reputation, erupted with discussions about recipe plagiarism and cultural appropriation. I didn't publicize my role in this. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves, and the culinary community did the rest. Ethan reported that Stephanie was completely freaking out about the cookbook situation. She's on the phone constantly, trying to get the publisher to reverse their decision. Dad asked where all these recipes really came from, and she just screamed at him to mind his own business. This pressure point was widening existing cracks in their relationship. Robert, already stressed about the mysterious financial movements, was now questioning other aspects of Stephanie's story. Meanwhile, I continued building my network of allies. My sister Judith flew in to stay with me for support. Diana organized a gathering of old friends who had been slowly excluded from my life under Stephanie's influence. Even my neighbor Harriet, who had witnessed Robert and Stephanie entering my house without permission, provided a written statement about what she had seen. The most unexpected ally came in the form of Robert's childhood friend Martin, now a respected judge, who reached out after hearing rumors about my supposed decline. "I've known you since I was 10 years old, Margaret," Martin said during our lunch meeting. "You were sharper than most of the parents, and you still are. Something doesn't add up here." When I carefully explained what had been happening, showing him documentation rather than just making claims, his judicial demeanor gave way to genuine anger. "This is elder abuse. Pure and simple," he stated, "and I've seen enough cases to recognize the pattern. What can I do to help?" With Martin's connections and Barbara's legal expertise, we built a comprehensive plan not just to defend me, but to expose Stephanie's pattern of manipulation and financial exploitation. By now, I had amassed substantial evidence. Financial records showing unauthorized transfers, documentation of the quitclaim deed I had never signed, affidavits from Eleanor's family about similar patterns, statements from family members who had been told falsehoods about my mental state, and clear proof that Stephanie had stolen and monetized my family heritage, were ready. Barbara announced after reviewing our case file. "The question is, do you want to pursue criminal charges, or is your priority regaining control of your assets and clearing your name?" I thought of Robert. Still my son. Still the baby I had nursed. The boy I had raised. I want the truth to come out, but I don't want to destroy my son in the process. He's a victim too, even if he doesn't see it yet. Barbara nodded. Then we proceed carefully. We present the evidence in a way that gives Robert a chance to make this right before legal consequences become inevitable. As we finalized our strategy, Ethan called with one last piece of information. "Grandma, Mom's really losing it. Dad confronted her about the cookbook, and she said she's going to delete everything on your computer so you can't prove anything. She's planning to come to your house tomorrow when she thinks you'll be at your doctor's appointment." I exchanged glances with Barbara. "Tell her thank you," Barbara said to Ethan, "and tell her not to worry." Well, be ready. The stage was set for a confrontation I had never wanted, but could no longer avoid. This wasn't just about soup recipes anymore. It was about truth, justice, and reclaiming my life from someone who had tried to steal not just my assets, but my very identity. The plan was simple but effective. Rather than trying to prevent Stephanie from coming to my house, we would let her come, but not find what she expected. I had indeed scheduled a doctor's appointment for 2 p.m., a fact that Ethan had confirmed Stephanie knew about. But instead of attending that appointment, I would be waiting at home with Barbara, Martin, and a private investigator Barbara had hired to document whatever happened. My laptop, which Stephanie presumably planned to access, had been replaced with a decoy. The real computer, containing all my documented evidence, was safely elsewhere. Security cameras, installed by the investigator, would record everything. At 2:15 p.m., right on cue, a car pulled into my driveway. From our position in the kitchen, we watched through the blinds as Stephanie approached the front door, looking nervously over her shoulder before using a key. A key she should not have had since Id changed the locks. Interesting, Barbara murmured. She must have had another copy made before you changed them. The sound of the key turning was followed by Stephanie calling out cautiously, "Margaret, are you home?" After a moment of silence, we heard her footsteps moving through the house toward my home office. Barbara nodded to the investigator, who was monitoring the cameras from a tablet. We waited 5 minutes, giving Stephanie time to settle into whatever she was doing. Then, moving quietly, we made our way to the office doorway. There she was, sitting at my desk, furiously going through my computer files, deleting documents one after another. So focused was she on her task that she didn't notice us until Barbara cleared her throat. Stephanie jumped, her face draining of color. "Margaret, I thought you had a doctor's appointment. I was just..." Robert asked me to get some family photos for a project. "Interesting approach to collecting photos," Barbara observed dryly. "Most people don't start by deleting files." "Who are you?" Stephanie demanded, quickly regaining her composure. "Margaret, who are these people? Are you having some kind of intervention? Because Robert and I have been very concerned about your memory lapses and paranoia." "Wilson's attorney," Barbara replied calmly. "And you're currently trespassing and attempting to destroy evidence of financial fraud and elder abuse." Stephanie laughed, though I could see the panic in her eyes. "That's ridiculous. Margaret gave me a key, and there's no fraud. Robert has power of attorney to manage his mother's affairs because of her condition. Ask any family member about her declining memory. Except I never gave Robert power of attorney," I said quietly. "And the document claiming I did has a forged signature, not even a good one." Martin stepped forward. "Mrs. Wilson has undergone thorough cognitive assessment by 3 independent specialists, all of whom have certified she is mentally sound. Meanwhile, we have documented evidence of unauthorized financial transactions, a fraudulent quitclaim deed, and a systematic campaign to undermine Mrs. Wilson's credibility with false claims about her mental state." Stephanie's expression hardened. "This is absurd. You're going to believe some doctors who spent an hour with her over her own son?" Roberts witnessed her confusion firsthand. "We've been managing a difficult situation as best we can, trying to protect Margaret from herself." The confrontation might have continued in this vein, accusation and counter-accusation, if not for the sound of the front door opening again. "Mom," Robert's voice called out. "Your car's here, but you're supposed to be at Dr. Miller's. Are you okay?" A moment later, Robert appeared in the office doorway, freezing at the sight of us all gathered there. "What's going on?" "Robert." Stephanie immediately went to his side. "Thank God you're here. Your mother has these people here making wild accusations about us trying to steal from her or something. She's clearly having some kind of paranoid episode." I watched my son's face, saw the confusion there, the automatic turning toward his wife for explanation and guidance. It broke my heart to see how completely she had him under her control. "Robert," I said gently, "there's something you need to see." Barbara handed him a folder. "These are bank records showing transfers from your mother's accounts to your joint account with Stephanie and then to accounts in Stephanie's name only. Accounts you don't have access to." Robert frowned, beginning to flip through the documents. "That's not possible. We set up those transfers to manage Mom's finances for her care." "For her care?" Barbara raised an eyebrow. "Then perhaps you can explain why over $200,000 has been moved to accounts in the Cayman Islands. Is your mother receiving care there?" Robert's head snapped up, genuine shock on his face. "What? No, that's not, Steph. What is she talking about?" Stephanie's demeanor changed instantly. "She's lying, obviously. These people are trying to come between us, just like I warned you they would. Your mother has been planning this for months, trying to paint me as some kind of villain because she can't accept that she's not the center of the family anymore." But Robert was still looking at the bank statements, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "These are real bank documents, Steph. With your signature. Accounts I've never seen before." "It gets worse," Martin said quietly, handing Robert another folder. "This contains evidence regarding Stephanie's previous situations. Before she met you, she was married to William Garrett. His mother, Eleanor, owned a historic home in Charleston, valued at nearly $1 million. Within 2 years of Stephanie entering the family, Eleanor was declared incompetent and institutionalized. The house was sold, supposedly for her care. Eleanor died 3 months later. The money disappeared. This is character assassination, Stephanie hissed. Robert, they're trying to poison you against me. But Robert was reading, his face growing paler by the minute. There was an aunt too? Before Eleanor, wealthy, isolated, declared incompetent shortly after Stephanie moved in with her. Assets liquidated, died shortly after institutionalization. Martin confirmed. The pattern is consistent. And now, Barbara added quietly, the same pattern with your mother, isolation from family support, claims of mental decline, transfer of assets, plans for institutionalization. Robert looked up at me, real fear in his eyes now. Mom, is this true? It's all documented, I said gently. But there's more, son. I nodded to the investigator, who turned his tablet around to show the live feed from the kitchen. There on the screen was Ethan, sitting at my kitchen table with Diana and Judith. Ethan's been keeping me informed, I explained, about the whispered conversations, the secret meetings, the instructions about what the children can and cannot tell me. You turned my son against me. Stephanie's voice rose to a shriek. You manipulative old witch. Actually, the investigator spoke for the first time. The young man approached his grandmother independently when he became concerned about what he was witnessing at home. Robert seemed overwhelmed, looking from the financial documents to the video feed of his son to his increasingly volatile wife. There's one more thing you should see, I said softly, handing him my old recipe box. Your father gave me this on our first anniversary. 4 generations of Wilson family recipes. The recipes Stephanie has been claiming as her own heritage on her blog and in her cookbook. Robert opened the box, recognition dawning on his face as he saw the familiar cards in his grandmother's handwriting, his great-grandmother's spidery script. These are our family recipes. I remember this box from when I was a kid. Stephanie has been presenting these as her own family heritage, Barbara explained, monetizing them through her blog and cookbook. When your mother was making the authentic family soup that day in the kitchen, she hit me with a ladle. I finished quietly, because I was making the real version of the soup she had claimed came from her grandmother. Robert turned to Stephanie, genuine bewilderment on his face. Why would you do that? Why claim Mom's family recipes as your own? Stephanie's composure cracked completely. Because everything about your precious mother is so special, isn't it? Her traditions, her recipes, her place in the family. I was supposed to just stand in her shadow forever? Be grateful for her hand-me-down wisdom. So you decided to steal her identity? Robert asked incredulously. Her family heritage? Her house? Her money? I earned it, Stephanie shouted. Do you have any idea how hard it is to play the dutiful daughter-in-law year after year, listening to everyone go on about wonderful Margaret and her wonderful traditions? I deserve to be the center of the family. Not her. The room fell silent at this raw admission. Stephanie seemed to realize what she had revealed and quickly tried to backtrack. I mean, that's not Robert. They're twisting everything. Your mother has been jealous of me from day one. She's been trying to undermine our marriage, turn you against me. Can't you see that? But the damage was done. Robert was looking at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. The money, Steph. Over $200,000. Where is it? That's our retirement fund, she said defensively. I've been investing for our future. In accounts I don't have access to, that I didn't even know existed. Robert's voice was quiet but firm. And Mom's house? The quitclaim deed I supposedly signed but have no memory of signing. Stephanie's eyes darted around the room, looking for escape. This is ridiculous. I don't have to stand here and be accused like this. I'm leaving, the investigator said, stepping toward the door. The police would like to ask you some questions first. They're waiting outside. Stephanie's face contorted with rage. She turned to me, pointing a shaking finger. This isn't over. Margaret, you think you've won. But you haven't seen what I'm capable of. Actually, I replied calmly. I believe I have. And now, finally, so has Robert. As the investigator escorted Stephanie out, Robert sank into the desk chair, head in his hands. Mom, I don't know what to say. I can't believe. I didn't see. I went to my son and put my hand on his shoulder. She's very good at what she does, Robert. She had us all fooled for a long time. He looked up, eyes wet with tears. How can you even speak to me after what I've done? What kind of son does that make me? A human one, I said softly. Who made mistakes? Who trusted the wrong person? But who, I hope, will help make things right now? Robert nodded, straightening his shoulders slightly. I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. Whatever you need. As he followed me to the kitchen where Ethan waited, I felt an enormous weight lift. The confrontation I had dreaded was over. The truth was out. My son was beginning to see clearly again. There would be legal consequences, financial disentanglements, family healing to navigate. But the worst was over. I had stood my ground, fought for the truth, and reclaimed my place in my own life story. And I had done it not with anger or bitterness, but with dignity and determination. Just as my mother and grandmother would have done. The weeks following the confrontation were difficult but cleansing, like the aftermath of a powerful storm. There was debris to clear, damage to assess, but also a freshness in the air that had been missing for too long. Robert faced the consequences of his actions with a humility that made me proud, even through my lingering hurt. He worked tirelessly with Barbara to reverse the financial damage, signing affidavits confirming he had never granted power of attorney or signed the quitclaim deed to our family home. He voluntarily repaid every penny that had been transferred from my accounts, even selling his boat to make up the difference when we discovered Stephanie had already spent a significant portion. I should have seen the signs. He told me one evening as we sat on my back porch, the same porch where he had played as a boy, the way she isolated me from friends who'd known me too long, how she always had a story about someone betraying her or letting her down. The constant little lies I'd catch her in but excuse away. Manipulators like Stephanie are experts at what they do, I reminded him. They target good people, people who want to believe the best of others, who are loyal and trusting. Those aren't flaws, Robert. They're virtues that she exploited. Family members processed their own guilt at having believed Stephanie's whisper campaign about my mental decline. My niece Sarah organized a family gathering, not a formal reunion, just a simple backyard cookout, where many approached me privately with apologies. I should have called you directly instead of just accepting what Stephanie said, Cousin Ellen admitted. When I think about all the times I've known you, the idea that you were confused never rang true. We move forward now, I told each of them. No more division in this family. Stephanie herself faced more serious consequences. The evidence Barbara had gathered, combined with the documentation from Eleanor Garrett's nephew, led to criminal charges of fraud, financial elder abuse, and attempted exploitation. Rather than face trial, Stephanie accepted a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and mandatory counseling. She'll likely do this again, Barbara warned me. The plea deal limits her ability to access seniors' finances, but these types of predators are remarkably adaptable. At least the next potential victim might find her history with a simple background check. I noted, that's something Eleanor and her aunt never had. One of the sweetest outcomes was my renewed relationship with my grandchildren. Ethan, of course, had already proven his loyalty and perception, but his siblings Emma and Tyler were initially confused and hurt by everything that had happened. Did Mommy really try to steal your recipes? 7-year-old Emma asked one afternoon while helping me roll out pie dough in my kitchen. Your mommy was confused about some things, I answered carefully. Sometimes people want things that belong to others so badly that they convince themselves it's okay to take them. Like when Tyler took my teddy bear and said it was his. I smiled, pressing the dough into the pie plate. Something like that, but grown-up problems are usually more complicated. Dad says we're going to have Sunday dinners here again, Emma said, changing the subject with the beautiful resilience of childhood. Can I help cook? Always, I promised, showing her how to crimp the edges of the crust. That's how recipes stay alive, by passing them from one generation to the next. Robert moved out of the house he had shared with Stephanie, taking the children to a small rental property nearby. The divorce proceedings were underway, complicated by the financial irregularities, but guided by a fair-minded judge who prioritized the children's well-being. True to Emma's announcement, Sunday family dinners resumed at my home. The first one was awkward, with Robert still carrying the weight of shame and the children uncertain about the new family configuration. But by the third week, we had found our rhythm again. "This tastes like I remember from when I was a kid," Robert said one Sunday, eating my chicken and dumplings. I'd forgotten how good the real thing is. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were difficult conversations, painful realizations, moments when the hurt bubbled up again. But we worked through them honestly, without the manipulative filter that had distorted our family communication for so long. 6 months after the confrontation, I made a decision that surprised even me. I would publish my family cookbook after all, not as a commercialized product like Stephanie had attempted, but as a legacy for both my family and others. Recipes from 6 generations. The Wilson family table became a labor of love. With Diana's help, I scanned the original recipe cards, included family photos and stories about each dish, and added my own notes about how these traditions had sustained us through good times and bad. A small local publishing house agreed to produce it, with a portion of proceeds going to an organization that combated elder abuse and exploitation. The launch event, held at our community center, brought together family, friends, and neighbors in a celebration not just of food, but of resilience and truth. As I signed copies, many people shared their own stories of family recipes and traditions, but also of family conflicts, manipulations they had experienced, elders they worried about. I realized that by sharing my story honestly, I had opened a space for others to examine their own family dynamics more critically. "Your cookbook is beautiful, Grandma," Ethan said, helping me pack up at the end of the event. At 16, he was already taller than me, with his grandfather's kind eyes. "But you know what's really cool? You showed us how to stand up for yourself without becoming bitter, how to fight for what's right without letting it poison you." His insight touched me deeply. I hadn't thought about it that way, but he was right. Throughout this ordeal, I had worked hard to maintain my dignity, to seek justice rather than vengeance, to leave space for healing rather than permanent division. The following Sunday, I tried something new. Instead of making my traditional soup recipe exactly as my mother had taught me, I invited all 3 grandchildren into the kitchen and asked for their input. "What if we added a little lemongrass?" suggested Tyler, who had recently discovered an interest in cooking shows. "Could we make it spicier?" Ethan asked. "I want to try adding star anise like in that faux soup we had at the restaurant." Emma chimed in. Together, we created something new. A soup that honored our family tradition while embracing new influences. As we gathered around the table with Robert and Judith, steam rising from our bowls, I felt a profound sense of rightness. "To family recipes," I said, raising my spoon in a toast. "Old and new." "To Grandma," Ethan countered, who taught us that family, like soup, needs both tradition and adaptation to stay alive. Later, washing dishes with Robert like we had done together when he was a boy, I reflected on all we had been through. I said, "When Stephanie hit me with that ladle, as horrible as it was, it forced everything into the open. Sometimes the worst moments lead to necessary truths." Robert nodded, drying a bowl slowly. "I've been thinking about that. How sometimes we need a shock to see what's been right in front of us all along." "And what do you see now?" I asked gently. He smiled, the genuine smile I had missed for so long. "Family. Real family. Not perfect. Sometimes messy. But honest. And worth fighting for." As the evening wound down, I walked through my kitchen, touching the familiar counters, the well-worn cookbooks, the recipe box that had started it all. I thought of my mother, my grandmother, all the women whose wisdom had flowed down to me through the simple, profound act of cooking for those they loved. "You were right, Mom," I whispered to the quiet kitchen. "Food made with love does taste different, and no one can steal the heart that goes into it." I had lost a daughter-in-law but regained my son. I had been knocked down but had risen stronger. I had nearly lost my place in my own family but had instead created space for a more authentic belonging, all because I had refused to be erased. Some might see my story as one of victimization, but I prefer to see it as one of empowerment, a reminder that we are never too old to stand up for ourselves, to fight for truth, to protect what matters. So what about you? Have you ever had to stand up for yourself and your family? Have you faced someone who tried to push you aside or take what was rightfully yours? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more real-life stories of family challenges and triumphs. And remember, family recipes, like family bonds, require both tradition and the courage to adapt. Thank you for listening to my story, and may your own family table be a place of truth, healing, and love.